It's been a year since launch, and this game has changed a lot since the CBT days. There's a lot of new content and free stuff being given away for the anniversary, and Seasons sent me some limited codes to give away as well. So firstly, for new and returning players, you can find the link to this beginner's guide in the description and pinned in comments below. I have two giveaway links at the top of the guide if you want to enter. They'll both be ending on July 24th, and I'll email the codes to the winners. Good luck, and let's get into discussing the new tier list for version 2.0 part 1 since Fenny is not out yet. So you might have noticed that Cherno is still at the top even though Lyfe has a 3.1 second boss kill clear. Well, that's because the new bosses are designed specifically for Lyfe's kit, and Cherno is still the most broken DPS for most of the bosses. So if we take a quick look at the bosses and DPS guide, then we can see that Lyfe really excels on bosses that are designed for her and that are vulnerable to burst ballistic damage. So she remains at the top, and maybe she should be in her own category. But Lyfe Infinite Sight definitely has the potential to replace and be even more broken. We don't know how good the new Fenny will be for her, but she'll probably be a very good support who could push Lyfe's damage to the moon. We might even get a 2-second boss clear if the combo is overpowered. But another reason Cherno is ahead of Lyfe is because Lyfe needs a bunch of investment like M2 and her signature weapon to pull off the broken damage, compared to Cherno, who just needs good supports, which she has many options for, and she's also just good even with her tier 5 4-star event weapon. Next, I want to talk about Kaguya and why she's been overtaken by Cherno. Kaguya is still the most universal support who fits in all teams, but nowadays for neural speedruns, you prefer other top tier supports like 5-star Mauxir, Enya, and Tess instead. So her value for investment has gone down a bit. Then we have Siris Katya, who's an SSS Plus ahead of Katya because of her ult nuking capabilities in Neuro. Though Katya is pretty close to her in placement because she's very good in general content, and her sustained ballistic DPS is a good long-term investment. Mauxir Shadoka is an SSS Plus because she's the best support in many of the teams because of Alloy Truth and Kebeche. She gives a massive attack buff and an easy target with Kebeche, which works for most of the top tier DPS units in the meta right now. Then we have a pretty big change to discuss, with Yao being knocked down to SSS from SSS Plus. She's no longer the queen of DPS, but she's still a good investment for new players if they don't have SSS Plus characters for neural simulation. Chenxing and Coronet are still in SSS, and their value is decreasing a lot every patch, but Fenny Coronet is at least a good option for beginners who want to have an easy time in the early game. Enya and Tess are meta supports who are used very often in neural simulation, and if you have all of the SSS Plus characters and their signature weapons, then you might want to consider pulling for any of these two if you don't have them. Enya buffs skill damage, and Tess gives both a general damage buff and Regent's ultimate. They're both super useful. The rest of the operatives are kind of in the same positions as the last tier list, but the only major change I've made here is bumping Eatchel to SS from S. This is because the top 3 DPS characters in the meta benefit greatly from her attack buff, and healing has also become more desirable for most of the casual players, since with the release of Warden, we might see more bosses that the average player finds to be difficult. Now, let's move on to the team building guide. This guide has some major changes. I removed a bunch of stuff to optimize for performance, and the support table was just unnecessary repetition. I also removed rankings of DPS since it matters a lot on your investment. But with that, I've also added all the new updates for this patch. Firstly, we have the details of the 3 new bosses added, who are basically designed for Lyfe IS if you look at their resistances, so she's obviously the best DPS for them, but as mentioned before, she's also the best DPS for bosses that need burst ballistic DPS. Though this is assuming that all the DPS characters have at least M2 and their signature weapon. Also, you can click on the links under the bosses to see Vic's in-depth guides explaining their mechanics and strategies to beat them. Then, in the Meta DPS support guide, I added Lyfe's support priorities. I explained this section in great detail in my Lyfe Infinite Sight video if you're interested, but in general, her best team is either Mauxir and Kaguya or Kaguya and Tess, depending on your investment and the boss you're facing. Then, in the classification section, the new Lyfe IS is added under Burst Ballistic Kinetic Damage in the DPS matrix, and in the support matrix, she's added for her final damage buff, stun, and kinetic resistance shred with Twilight. Lastly, we have my 3 recommendations for looking up neural clears on EN server as usual, Vic, Rio, and Shameless End. And finally, I want to thank everyone who contributed to the guide: Vic Yash, Shameless End, Sofaman, Rio, Sweel, Alunan, Alex, Scrabble, Skateo, Hopper, Gaz, and special thanks to Archive Risen for his calculations and helping figure out how some mechanics work. It's great to see this collaborative project going smoothly, and we're going to have a lot more exciting stuff coming in the future. If you're interested in contributing, you can always DM me on Discord to show interest. And I also got a few questions about the best pick for the anniversary banner after I made this video on the best pick for the limited 5-star weapon selector. And my advice for those wondering is to wait for Fenny's evaluation before locking in your choice for the anniversary banner, because she might shift the meta for supports, and there's no reason to make a hasty decision when you can just wait a few more days. Also, if you're a new player who's never seen this guide before, you should check it out. It's got almost everything you need to know. We've got starters guides for a basic introduction to the game's systems and recommendations for them. We have multiple builds and evaluation for every character in the game. We have a section where I explain mechanics that are hidden and terms that new players often find confusing. And we also have links to other resources that might be useful for you. But some of these might be outdated, so keep that in mind. There's also a few new additions to the guide for those who have not taken a look at the base DOM section in a while. I've added a link to the KR puzzle solver, which is way easier to use. Just open the link, then if you're using a Chromium browser, for example, you can just right-click and translate to English, then fill in the blanks as I instructed in the video. And I also added a link to Vic's guide for the brand new massage game mode that the cultured individuals at CSUN added in this patch. Alright, that's it for this video. I hope you found this video useful, and have a nice day.